Greetings and welcome to Parsing John. Today we finally get to take verses 6 through 10 and in the Greek version and the Latin version and compare the two together. We don't really have a rubric to go by except the Greek. What we want to see is how closely our Vulgate translation here matches up with the original Greek of the Bible. Okay, so I realize now that I should probably color coordinate these. Probably have the Vulgate be one color, red pen, and the Greek the other color so that it's easier to differentiate them. Sorry, and my notes are a mess. Try to have good handwriting, people. Okay, so as we take a look at the first clause, agenito through Ioannes, we've got a completed action verb there. Aorist indicates a action that has happened once, or it's a finished action in the past. As we take a look at what we have in the Latin, we have fuit, which comes from sum, a verb of being. Agenito is not a verb of being. That is, I'm not sure exactly what classification it falls under, but I guess we would say a verb of begottening, which isn't a word. But this one is normally a linking verb or a verb that indicates the existence of something. This one, as it says right there, born, is more the idea of that one. It can act sort of the same way as me, as far as I've seen it anyway. So these two are relatively similar. This is the perfect tense, which is the completed tense of the, we would say the perfective tense of the Latin. So they're relatively close. It doesn't have the same idea as agenito there. What would be the closer Latin equivalent? No, that's foretell. Well, if I can remember it, I'll bring that in it. So, anthropos, homo, roughly equivalent. This is the one, the Greek word that's normally used of just generic man, mankind, not like aner. And this is the Latin equivalent of that. We don't have wir here. This is more humanity. Okay, having been sent. And here we have having been sent. This is a perfect passive participle, probably not middle. This is also a perfect passive participle, and these two are very similar. This is the word we get apostle from. This one we don't naturally get apostle from. They're similar. This one is more along the lines of, I think, send out as an ambassador, whereas mito there is just send, as far as I've seen it. So this one could be a little bit more clear if it were a different form of send as ambassador. Since I haven't read much legalese in Latin, I'm not sure if this is what they use. I'm going to presume it's not, since it's rather normal. Okay, by God, we've got an ablative of agent there. We've got a genitive with para of agent there, so those two match. We've got a dative of possession here in the Greek, and we've also got a dative of possession here in the Latin, so those two match up wonderfully. Onoma, name, nothing particular there. In the Greek here, we don't have an actual verb to show the possession, but in the Latin we do, so the Latin is a little bit more clear than the Greek, as the Greek just wants us to assume it. The Latin provides it for us. That's not really straying, it's just adding clarity for the poor Roman reader. Okay, now we can move on to our next clause. Oh, it should be noted that these are the exact same words. This is actually the Greek form just written out in Latin with the added breathing in there. So what we might be able to read from this is that as far as the translator of the Vulgate was aware, there was a breath mark in this original form, so might want to add that in. Read, it's not for certain. You'd have to ask somebody from back then, or a wiser Greek scholar than I. Okay, this one came for a witness, and we've got hic this one, so we've got the equivalence there, close and close rather than far. We have probably a perfect tense, and here we have the aorist tense, the perfective tense of Greek and the perfective tense of Latin. So these two match wonderfully. And then we have our very interesting use of ace to show purpose for a witness. And we've got the same use for a witness in Latin, and I'm not aware of how common this use of in the Latin is, let alone in the Greek, so I can't really comment on that. Suffice it to say that the two match. We've got in plus the accusative here, ace plus the accusative here. So far, so good. We've got a purpose clause in the Greek with hina. We've got a purpose clause in the Latin. So far, so good, they match. We've got our verb here, third singular aorist, active, subjunctive, sei, there. But curiously, in the Latin, we've got a object here, and we've got the verb of just holding. This is actively, actively in the subjunctive sense, that he may be a witness. He may witness to people. But in here is that he might hold a witness for people. So there's a different idea between the two. And I can't really detect a large difference, except that in the Latin it's indicating that the witness is, it's being more specific with its word. I think there is a Latin word that could have been used instead of this phrase. I'm not sure why the author would do that. I don't detect a major problem there. I could be wrong. That's something that you can look into more on your own. Okay. Got about the light, and in Latin we've got about the source of light, lumine rather than lux, as we had, I think, in verse 4. So there is a little bit of separation in ideas here. This is just the Greek word for light, but this is the Latin word for source of light, as opposed to just like light from a star, which is what we had this author use previously. So the author's got a different idea going on, intentionally or unintentionally, we can't say. But these two do not match up perfectly. They're a little bit off, sort of like these two. This might be a little bit more off than these two. Anyway, we've got another purpose clause here and another purpose clause here. So far, so good. All, okay. And then we have subjunctive verb there, subjunctive verb there. These two are equivalent and they match. This is a perfective aorist, and this is a correction there. These two do not match up. This is perfective aorist, and this is a imperfect tense. I know the two terms, very confusing. Sorry. Now, basically, perfective tenses are in Latin the perfect, the pluperfect, and the future perfect. The imperfective tenses are tenses that are ongoing, incomplete, have the idea that the person is doing the action and still doing it as we're talking, are the present, the future, and the imperfect of Latin. In Greek, we've got the imperfectives of the present and the imperfect naturally and the future, and then the perfective tenses of the perfect tense, the pluperfect tense, the aorist tense, and the future perfect tense. Those all talk about a single action or a completed action. So there's a different idea here. So the indication is who were continuing to believe, but this is just those who believed once and they're done. Does that mean they stopped believing? Context would probably say no, and then the whole idea of the passage would indicate no. So these two are also slightly off from each other. This has a probably a dangerous idea if someone were to take it too seriously. That is still okay. Scooching up, have to make sure it's still in view of the camera, and scooching down. Okay, through that one. So far, so good. Got not was the light. Not was the light. This time we switched back to lux in the Latin, which is a closer match in our Greek with phos from before. So that strange variant there has been fixed. Okay, but purpose clause, we've got the same martyrese there about the light, and in our Latin we've got but in order to hold a witness, again we've got that same clause there. So there's internal consistency. We've got de lumine again. It's very, very strange that he's got lux here, but lumine there and there. Already commented on that. Fold this imperfectively. Okay, verse number 9. This one, he was the light, true light. Okay, and we've got he was the light, the true one, which enlightens every man. And we've got which right there gives light, shines on every man. So, yeah, roughly equivalent for these two as best as I am able to tell. Moving on. Coming into the world. And we've got coming into the world. I think I stumbled over that one a lot. So these two are relatively similar. This one is obviously accused of obviously modifying homonym. This one was less sure about what it was modifying since ho was accusative. So the Latin here is a little bit more clear than the Greek on what the Latin author intends. So that's a good show of things. All right, 10. In the world he was. In the world it was. So far, so good. And the world through him became. And world through him was made. We've got made here versus became here. A slightly different idea between the two, but not so very far from each other. It's better than the difference maybe of est versus gidnomai, or probably misremembering that one. The verb for become in Greek. So a little bit of improvement here over what we had before. And then we've got, and the world did not know him. We've got, and the world, him, did not understand him. Egno and cognovit, they are rough equivalents in each other's languages. So these two are pretty close. Taking a look at the two texts very quickly and choppily there, sorry. We can see that there are a couple instances where the Latin strays from what the Greek says in either its construction or its choice of words. Not too huge of a deal anywhere in particular. So they're relatively close. We've got he witnesses versus holds a witness. And that might just be a cultural difference in how the Romans talked about witnessing versus how John here is talking about witness. So that might be innocent enough. The big one that would concern me is, where is it? We've got, keep shifting things out of the camera, pisteusosin, and then we've got crederent there. That is the real big difference between the two, where we've got an imperfect and therefore an imperfective, unfinished action in the subjunctive versus an aorist, which is a definitively finished action in the Greek. Big difference. And that, from my understanding of the language, as a problem with the two, where the Latin makes an error that it should not have made. However, this is the only serious problem. The whole problem about martyrese, not too big of a deal. Oin phos versus lumine, not too big of a deal again. So they're very, very close. Minor errors. I'm rambling. See you next video as we take a look at the end of this passage. I hope taking a look at these two together is helpful to you, and I'm sorry for how chaotic it seems. In future, I will try to color coordinate them a little bit more. I'd rather not use red for one of them. I'll see if I can find a different color to use. Anyway, everybody, have a good day. Study hard, study well. Farewell.